Hey everybody, welcome. I am Stuart Cohen, your host of Group Sales Power Hour. Our mission here is to help you build a bigger, better group business. And although things are sort of in this in-between stage right now, right, Britton? I think everyone's lives, let alone businesses, especially in travel, we're in this in-between. And I'm referencing that because I had the incredible opportunity to give a keynote address virtually for Amber Waterway. It's all about what are we doing in this in-between time, right? Are we being prodigious? Are we being tenacious? Are we going to sit back and wait until the phone rings, or are we going to start planting seeds now, redoing our business plan, learning, getting new credentials? There's a million things we could be doing. We could be running hard. We could be sprinting rather than sort of sitting it out and waiting. And that's why I brought you here today, Britton, because you have your own podcast, which I want you to tell us about. And
Sure.
I love the niche, like small ship cruising, but okay, tell me more. There's got to be more to it. So would you be so kind to introduce yourself to our awesome audience?
Absolutely. And Dodger will introduce himself walking behind me as well. My name is Britton.frost. I run two websites along with my dad, Ralph Grizzle, who is, we're both travel journalists specializing in cruising. One of our sites is River Cruise Advisor, and on that site, we focus specifically on river cruises. And then on our ocean cruise site, Avid Cruiser, we focus on mostly small ship and luxury ocean cruises, but we do some larger ship coverage as well. Um, I also host a podcast called Avid Travel with Britton Frost. And there we talk about both river and ocean cruises, which cruises are the best for millennials, which itineraries are the best for first-time cruisers. A lot of just basic information that strives to give you the information that you need to go to your client and say, this is the cruise that I think is for you. And our sites strive to do that as well. And just, I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. I'll say this again at the end. If you go to either River Cruise Advisor or avidcruiser.com, it is very easy to reach me. So if you have any questions after this segment, or if you have any questions about cruising, you can always contact me through the websites.
That's awesome. And if if you're listening now here in the audience or as a podcast, we'll put the URL in the show notes so you can visit her and see the podcast channel. And I really love the fact also that you're focused also on helping the travel advisor grow their business, be more successful, and you have a specific niche. I mean, one of the things I preach all the time is that, hey, travel entrepreneurs, the more specific you are in this business, then people will know when they need you or not. And so just you tell me what brought you to this particular segment. I know Ralph, his focus is river cruising, and he's been on the show. He's been a part of the Group Sales Success Summit too, as you were.
Mm-hmm.
But what brought you here, especially? I got it. You're a millennial, yeah? You're one of them.
Yes. I am almost too young to be a millennial, which was shocking to me when I found that out. But I am
Right.
right on the cusp. I think I was born in 95, and that's just right there. Yeah, I mean, it definitely had a lot to do with my dad and his interests, because he owns the business, and so we kind of ended up in this segment. But the he realized that in river cruising, in the early 2000s when he started this, that there was just this opportunity where he had gone on a river cruise, loved it, reached out to these companies and started working closely with them because river cruising has completely, as some of you may know, just blown up over the past couple years. And you look at these companies who are christening 7 ships a year.
Right.
Viking,
Right.
continually sets records for how many river cruise ships. So there is an extreme demand for river cruising. So we were lucky to get into that, but it didn't start that way. We started when I was little, we were sailing on Carnival and Royal
Uh-huh.
Caribbean and
Right.
Disney and big ships all the time. And then I think my dad realized that there was this luxury market that wasn't as heavily marketed that maybe needed some help. And also, those are the cruises that he likes to do because he prefers that small ship environment. And I'm kind of the same way, but I don't mind doing a couple of bigger
Okay.
ship sailings either.
All right. You
But yeah, it's
said
important to look at who needs to be
sure.
built up, right?
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. You're both in sort of the right place at the right time. And to get your perspective, Britton, is very important. And we're here to talk mainly about groups, but of course we do business coaching in general here. And we're going to come back to this in a minute. But you said an important word. You used the word luxury. And I have
Hmm.
yet to meet a travel advisor who has said, nope, I don't want luxury. Give me the cheap stuff. That's all I'm going to sell. Round trip Staten Island ferry with a free hot dog and a sleeping bag. No, nobody wants to do cheap. Everybody wants luxury. The problem is we're not willing to really define it enough. And I think that's something we're going to
Sure.
accomplish on today's conversation. If I'm going to ask you, well, what does luxury mean in these segments? Of course, the first question is going to be to really define small ship, because you could have small ship, big ocean, small ship, small body of water, even river. But before that, I just want to do a shout out to some of our friends who are here in the virtual world here. Diane's in the house, and Diane says it's 82 degrees in Miami. So right now, Diane, I think you take the cake, because where Linda is, it's 20 degrees with snow. And Hans, I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks in Cancun. We have Mike Marshav and I are doing our mastermind. Yay! Finally in Cancun, and I suppose it's got to be in the 80s there every day. And Hans also made a very nice comment about Ralph Grizzle. He has one of the best river cruise books available, and he
Thank
does.
you. And
Definitely a celebrity.
we are currently overhauling that entire book just so everyone who's read the book or is interested in the book, it's a great resource and we are completely redoing it for 2021. We thought we were just going to go through and make some changes that needed to be made, but we went through and we just realized how much we've learned over the past couple of years and how many things have truly changed. And so we are really overhauling that book for 2021, but keep an eye out for that because it is
Oh,
an
that's good.
incredible resource.
That's great. And I think all travel, especially now on the other side of this crisis, we're going to see some differences, some nuances, right? And some
Hmm.
enhancements. So you're probably
Hmm.
going to have to re-edit it again as things
Yeah.
change, because the beautiful part is that these companies, um, uh, they have to deliver exceedingly fabulous satisfaction, or else nobody comes back, which means you have to keep ahead of the times. You can't react, you have to proact, especially in this sort of this in between right now. So if you're here as a guest, if you'd be so kind, if you have a comment, if we have a question, let your fingers do the typing. This is not a Zoom thing where we can see you can see us, but participate, engage, ask questions, give us an anecdote, share a story. And she's an expert in this field, so we want to make sure that you get your questions answered. And I want to start off first with, if you would define small ship, because I don't know too many, specifically of my boot campers, really, who have said to me, Stuart, this is what our specialty is. So kind of put a framework around small ship cruising. What is it? Then we're going to we'll go into the specifics of who it's for and group opportunities. I want to get everybody excited here and inspired. Maybe you'll leave this today saying, wow, I never thought of that. I'm going to try that, because it's now one more thing, Britton, because
Sure.
it's what I call a blue ocean. Blue ocean. You see, when it comes to marketing, whether it's travel or not, there's the red ocean approach to your business, and there's a blue ocean. And now, when I use the word ocean here, it has nothing to do with bodies of water. It has everything to do with red, meaning it's dog eat dog, it's rat race, it's highly competitive, it's price driven, commodity driven, and that's the travel advisors who fall into the generalist category. And then you have the
Hmm.
blue ocean, which is smaller, and it's not a bloodbath. It's it's not as competitive, and that's where travel advisors really need to be carving out a niche, and small ship cruising could be it. So take it away. Give us a definition of what is small ship cruising.
I'm going to answer that, but first I do want to go back to your luxury point that you made a few minutes ago,
Yes.
because luxury and small ship, as far as I'm concerned, tend to go hand in hand. When you make a ship smaller, a lot of these smaller ships have more crew. You get a higher passenger to crew ratio. And so for me, that is the pinnacle of the luxury experience, is to not be on a large ship where I'm waiting in a line of 25 people to get a drink. I want to be sitting by the pool. I want someone to come up to me. I don't want to have to move. And yes, I am spoiled in that way. And I have been since I was a teenager, because my dad has this lovely job and now I have this lovely job. But I do think that at the same time, while I see that as luxury, there are plenty of people my age who are just getting out of college dorm rooms who see a Royal Caribbean cruise as luxury, who see a Carnival cruise as luxury, who want a drink package, who want these buffets. And so luxury, like expensive, is a relative term. But when I talk about luxury, I tend to separate ships into three categories. So on my sites, I focus on premium, upper premium, and luxury. And I would say that the mainstream cruise lines that fall into the luxury sector are Regent, Silversea, Seabourn, and Crystal. And then you also have smaller ships like Ponant, Sea Dream. But when you look at a small ship, and then as you mentioned, we also have river cruises, which we'll talk about in a second, but I'm going to talk about big ship or small ship ocean right now. A small ship technically means anything under 1,000 people. And if you look at someone who's coming from a river cruise to an ocean cruise, they will say, I'm not going on a Viking ship with 750 or 1,000 passengers, because that's not a small ship to me. I want to go on a Ponant sailing that's 250 passengers or 300 passengers, or I want to go on one of these new yachts that's been built. I want to go on Sea Dream, which is 100 passengers on some of their ships. We look at Ponant has a yacht whose passenger capacity I think is like 32 or 36. And then you have, so small ships can mean so many different things. And I think that you touched on that, is like, what is a small ship experience? And I think that oftentimes has to be defined by the consumer, because if you're used to going on a 6,000 passenger ship, yes, a celebrity ship, a 2,000 passenger ship, is going to be smaller. And what does small exactly mean? On the river cruise vessels, you're never looking at more than 200 passengers on board. And then you can get even smaller in the river cruise sector in looking at barges, where some of those carry only 16 to 20 passengers. And so yes, a small ship is technically less than 1,000, but can be as few as just a couple of dozen.
Right, but beautiful, well explained, and I'm so glad that you addressed the word luxury. Right, it means so many different things to different people, and it's up to the advisor to, on a person by person basis, understand, ascertain what is luxury to you. I mean, I want to know, travel advisors, when's the last time you specifically, yeah, looking at you advisors, when's the last time you said to a consumer, what does luxury mean to you? And if they said, oh, I want vast buffets and I want the drink package, it's not your job to say, really?
Mm-hmm.
It's not spas and yoga class and all these special the dietary considerations where there's low fat or this or that. No, you're not the one making a judgment call, because that's what it means to them. And especially though, if you can actually have a niche, so you become a specialty in something, as Britton is talking about, then they'll know they need you, because that's what you're special. You're the one who can answer. Okay, when I say I'm a luxury travel advisor, let me tell you what that means.
Mhm.
So we have a question here from Zacchaeus that says, have you seen a lot of groups on river cruises? I know you've been on a lot. I don't know if you've kept count.
Mhm.
It would be interesting to hear how many.
Yeah.
I'm about to do my fourth, but she asks, have you seen a lot of groups on river cruises? And I can answer part two to this. Do the companies offer incentives for group bookings? And I can tell you, absolutely, yes, there are group contracts.
Yeah.
Right, the contracts work different from big ship to river cruise ship, but absolutely there are incentives. There are
Mhm.
opportunities. And in fact, you can do, and you mentioned charter earlier, which we'll get to, I've
Mhm.
done a partial ship charter on Amber Waterways. I'm doing a second one in July 2022, which is an altogether other option. But what's your experience seeing groups on river cruises?
All the time. I mean, regardless, usually when you're looking, I don't know. I think this is right from my experience working with the cruise lines. Usually, when you're looking at those incentives from the cruise companies, you're looking at booking about 10 people. Do you find that that's
Yes.
accurate? Yeah.
Yeah. 5
So
staterooms, 10
you
people.
so you have small groups, and that can be families or things like that, or you can look at doing ship charters. I was on a trip in right April of 2019. I was on an AMA ship, and there was a group of advisors that were on board, and I will say that it makes a difference when there are big groups of people who know each other. The river cruise becomes more lively in my experience when there are big groups of people. And so I see that often. I see that people like to travel on river cruise ships. Most of the time when I get, because we do like quote requests on my site, so people will say who they're looking to travel with, and then we'll send that information off. But most of the time people are traveling in at least one couple. And so it's really easy then to say, you as a consumer are going to get a discount for group booking likely as well. And so how many more couples can you bring on? So it's easy to put these groups together as well, even if you're finding people who want to sail at the same time and just putting them together that way, apart from having groups of people that are already established. But I do see a lot of groups, and we do hosted trips where there are groups as well. And so I see a lot of that on the rivers for
Yeah.
sure.
I agree with you. I just want to add a comment there. No doubt when you talk small ship, whether it's a small ocean or river cruise ship, keep in mind, everybody, that you have to assess if it's a group and they have specific activities or events they need to host. Make sure that there is space available, that it can be done, because on a river cruise ship, space is very limited. If you're lucky, you could, like on Ama, they have this chef's table room right at the aft on the ship. You can, because we had seminars back there when one of my earlier cruises with them. But that's important too. Make sure that
Mhm.
the group you may be thinking about can do, like Danny, I know you do your photography workshops. Oh my goodness, that's magnificent, because almost every day, well, every second of every day, there's something to look at, take pictures of. But just make sure that the activity, the events are going to match what can and cannot be done on a smaller vessel. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, on some of the river cruise ships, you're only looking at having one or two restaurants on board and then a lounge, maybe a library. And so on some, I mean, and then when you look at Crystal and Uniworld and Tauk, you do have those multiple dining venues, or Ama Magna that has 5 dining venues, Ama Waterways, double wide river vessel. But you want to, yes, make sure that the facilities are appropriate. One thing that I wanted to add to, because I was thinking about this when you were asking me about luxury and small ships, is and when looking at groups, is how customizable cruising is. And so that is another reason that it's really good for groups. When looking at river cruises, I would suggest looking, when you're booking a group, for a river cruise company like Ama, like Avalon, like Uniworld, one that includes multiple excursions in every port. So Ama Waterways has active excursions. Avalon has Avalon Choice program, and so they have an active discovery and classic excursion in almost every port. And then they have these active and discovery sailings, which are really good for people that want to sail with their children or people who are younger. And so when you're putting these groups together, I think that it's really important to make sure that there's variety on the ship and that everyone isn't going to have to go do the same tour, because it's not one size fits all. I mean, there are definitely tours that I see that I don't want to do. And so if I were in a group and we were all expected to go out during the day, I would like to have those options. But just apart from excursions, it's customizable in experience. Like we talked about luxury. Does your client want a ship where they're going to have a butler on board? There are so many factors, and you can really kind of hone in to what your client wants, what your client sees as luxury, what kind of vacation they want. And that's something that I really love about cruising, is that there are so many different types and different experiences.
I would believe too that because you're dealing with a smaller vessel, that the level of communication with the team, the group coordinator, and to get special stuff done might be a little bit easier because they're not dealing with well, man, we got 5,000 guests on this ship. If we got 5,000 requests, we just can't do it. Even though they have more venue space, I know from my cruise, because one of the things I teach, Britton, is that travel professionals should not be selling the off-the-shelf, bare bones, stripped down product with a group, because then it just becomes the same price everyone else is selling. Well, why should I book through you? That we have to value it up, package it up. And even though river cruising, to your point, is so much more inclusive, like it offers included excursions that people have a choice, you still need to get creative. You still need to have conversations with headquarters and say, listen, I've got 6 people. I've got 12. I had 23 people. What can we do special? And they've got ideas. There is stuff that can be done that can make your package a little different, a little special, and make it more saleable, more attractive. And so somebody would say, I don't need to go look and price shop because I need to come with this group because we're going to do something special. Like having, you have enough people, you can take that on Alma, for instance, you can take that restaurant and take it over for one night. Or you can work with them to arrange a private lunch at a restaurant in one of the cities that you're visiting. So yeah. Any more thoughts on like, on packaging, on making it special?
I completely agree with you. I think that the cruise companies, especially river cruise companies and these smaller ship companies, are really eager to work with people. When you're looking at a bigger company, it's hard. It's hard to get in touch with people. But when you're looking at these river cruise companies specifically, it is always so easy for me to just email someone a question. It's very, very easy to get in contact with people. And so I like that advice of just reaching out. And you have wonderful, on every river cruise, I don't think I've ever been on a river cruise and had a cruise director that I was like, they're okay. It's like everyone was like, oh my gosh, they're amazing. I love them. It's like they become part of the family. And so they're able to enhance the experience significantly. But yes, you have to ask for what you want and let them know who your group is and what they like to do. But on that Ama Viola trip that I mentioned earlier with all the agents, like our cruise director took them all off to go play a soccer game one day because they wanted to do that because they were all young. And so it's just things like that, fun things like that can happen. You just have to try to make them work.
Right. I love it. It's really exciting to think about the possibilities, which really are infinite. It's just only based on our ability to envision something fun and different. Hans, well, I'm going to get to your question in just a second, Hans. Kia said, hey, that's a nice group, easy to put together, right? So all of a sudden we're seeing that the big ships, I don't know why we sort of feel compelled, well, we need the big group, that's how we're going to make the money. It's got to be big. And I always say it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And the margins, friends, the profit margins on the small ship cruises. You heard Britton name those luxury lines and river cruising. You can make the same profit at the end of the day, okay? The same net profit with a group of 6 staterooms as you might with a group of 40. I'm just, maybe I'm embellishing a bit, but I may not be too
No,
far
I
from.
think you're right, depending on which sides we're looking at. If we're looking extreme, I agree with you.
Yeah. Linda adds here, luxury to me and my family was a balcony on Carnival, right? So you're absolutely
Yep.
right. Listen, I have dear friends and their favorite cruise line happens to be Celebrity, and they are definitely luxury travelers, but they stay up in the higher suites where they have the private areas.
The
So, and
retreat,
yes, the retreat.
as it's called on Celebrity. Yes.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because it is a very special, unique experience, and to them, that's luxury. Although you may not compare that Celebrity, and I used to work for Celebrity, near and dear to my heart, still to this day, that you may not consider even their newest class of ship uh, luxury, like a Sea Dream or a Regent. However, if you're at that level, it's an altogether different consumer experience. Hans has a question for you. What do you think about small ship cruising here in the U.S., such as American Queen Steamboat Company and American Cruise Line? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have hopefully a trip that I'm hosting with American Cruise Lines in July. We'll see what happens with that. But I think that especially right now, it's a really good time to explore cruising within the United States. And you have these companies, you have Uncruise, American Cruise Lines. These might be the only ships that can go to Alaska this year, too. We have to think about is that some of these small ship US based cruise lines are going to be the only shot for people to get to Alaska now that Canada has closed down cruise travel, depending on what happens there. And so I think that especially with all the uncertainty about going to Europe, I have so many people who are emailing me now. I have a trip booked at this point in the year. Should I go ahead and reschedule or should I wait? My advice for those questions is just always to wait and see what the cruise line does, because if you're going to be able to go, you're going to be able to go. But
Right.
for people who are worried about getting to Europe and those concerns are building, I think that it's a great option for people to look close to home and go somewhere where they're not flying over the ocean or worried about coming home or worried about having to quarantine. Um, and there are so many options. I think a lot of the time when we think about small ship cruising in the United States, we think about these river cruises, we think about the Columbia Snake, and we think about the Mississippi. But there are so many coastal cruises as well. There are so many options. You have the upper Mississippi, the lower Mississippi, you have all these segments of rivers as well. So there is so much more than what a lot of us think when we think that. And so I think that those are great options as well. I have heard from a few friends in the industry that they were not as pleased with the service on some of those ships as some of the European river cruises. But firsthand experience, I don't agree with that, and I haven't heard Ralph say the same thing either. So I think it again just depends on your expectations, but those ships are bigger than the European river cruises as well. So it is a completely different experience, but it is still a small ship and a great experience. And I think that we often look, just to go off for a second, we often look at Europe as this kind of mecca of history, and we look at it as being transported into another world. And a lot of us forget this history that we have right in our backyards. And so to do a Mississippi cruise can be really eye-opening in that way as well, or to do a Columbia Snake cruise. You learn all this history that you probably learned as a child, but maybe forgot about. And so that's special as well, to kind of get this American history enrichment that I tend to forget about traveling through France and Germany.
Right. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. And that's a really great question that about U.S. river cruising. I do agree. I think we're going to see a real big bump in that. And those travel professionals who are ready, meaning They're well trained. They understand how it works. They understand the product. They become an expert and market as such. They'll get it. I just read just the other day here in Memphis that I don't remember which line it was. They're making a bigger commitment to the Memphis New Orleans cruise, that run, which that's on my list. I could drive to the port. I've never lived in a port city, ocean port city. I do live in a river cruise port city, and I love it. When back in the day, I was downtown off Beale Street or hanging out downtown on the river, and those ships would come in and people were coming to tour my hometown, which is kind of cool, kind of nice. And I think
Yeah.
that's a great opportunity for groups, whether it's short term for you friends, short term, if they're not in the mood to fly, make big commitments to travel overseas, it could be long term too. Who knows? That could be your niche. Gail, you have a great question here, and Diane, you made a comment. Before I do that, we're about at the half, and I just want to remind everybody of something that's coming up that's really big. While I give Britton a chance to, what were you eating an orange before? No coffee,
I
no
was
tea, orange
eating
juice?
an or I can finish my orange right now while you speak if you'd like.
Go right ahead. So I just want to remind everybody right now, and Gail, we're going to start off with your question, that we do have Boot Camp Live. And Boot Camp Live is sort of replacing Group Sales Boot Camp, which has been around since 2015. It's going to be an all live virtual event. All of you, my dear boot campers, I love you. And since you're already in boot camp, you get the invitation. You'll get the special private link. And Group Boot Camp Live is going to be 9 hours over 3 days of my best training. That is March 23, 24, 25, June 1, 2, 3. If you are a subscriber to my podcast, thank you. Use the promo code FRIENDS299. FRIENDS299. I usually never make sales pitches. I never make sales pitches during these, Britton, but this is a big event, man. I'm going to be going 3 days, 3 half days, 3 hours a day. I want to be talking to hundreds of people because groups are going to bounce back bigger. There's going to be a higher crescendo than ever before. I truly believe that. So let's come on back to Gail's question here. Is the cruise director not an employee of the line in some cases? Should they be tipped for each service or at the end? They can really make the trip special if they are separate employees. How would we be sure they are taken care of? I've never heard that question before. What do you think, Britton?
Cruise lines have tipping guidelines generally. When you're looking at certain cruise lines, they already have gratuities included. And so there are usually specific guidelines for you're tipping this amount for the crew per day and this amount for the cruise director per day, per person. And you can choose to prepay those. You can choose to pay them afterward. And some lines like Riviera is a UK-based cruise line. They don't expect gratuities. And so I think that there are these guidelines, there are these suggestions, but ultimately it's up to the consumer. I usually tip based off of the guidelines. But if you receive incredible service, I mean, feel free to. I know a lot of people end up tipping cruise directors more at the end of the trip because they do so much. And are so engaged constantly and becomes such a part of the family almost. So
Right.
But yes, the cruise lines will generally let you know how to navigate that.
It's a great question, Gail. I can only tell you in my experience with Alma, the cruise manager is an employee. They're part of the family. And for my groups, I have always included the gratuities in the price because I try to make it easy. This was my friends and family, Britton, just so you know. I do this with friends and family only because I don't own a travel agency, never have. This is just something I do because I love river cruising. And I got friends and family who are jealous. They're like, we want to come too. Before you know it, you got a group. Idea
Yeah.
travel advisors. You know, I say to you every podcast, I say to you, how many groups are you leading next year? And in 2023 and in 2024, you should be leading yourself at least one group, going where you want to go, where you'd love to go, and let friends and family come with you. You'll be surprised, unless you're not fun. Because if you're not fun, nobody's going to come with you. But I know so many of you. You're fun and you're interesting. Um,
And just as
so
far as the employment question goes as well, it varies per cruise line. Some cruise lines don't, their crew is complete, their entire crew is completely employed by another. So it just depends.
right, it does vary. So you should know before you go. Check that out. But it definitely a great question. And if you are putting the group together yourself, it's your job to know the answers to all of these questions so that you're prepared. And I always say make it as seamless, easy as possible. So when I like to, with my family who's coming on this, I say, listen, I'm going to give you a number here, and that number includes the gratuities. However, you want to have cash on hand for the individual tour guides, right, Britton? Because in every, especially in a river cruise, you're going to have a local tour guide who they live there and they're showing you their hometown. And it is appropriate, in my experience, to have
Hmm.
to thank them for their personal services. So I always tell them
And
to.
coaches as well. Some cruise companies, like the employees, they own coaches that follow them the whole ride. And those are employees of the cruise line, but sometimes they are getting different buses in every port as well. So yes, you want to tip them as well.
Be
So
ready.
yes,
Yep.
always carry cash.
Yep. And in some countries, carry change for the bathrooms because it's right. Some of the public toilets are pay toilets.
And if you talk about luxury for a second, one of my favorite stories is that my father went on a talc cruise and they were on a tour and they gave them coins to go to the bathroom, and he always uses that as an example of this is how inclusive talc's product is that they gave us change to go to the toilet. So
There you go. Diane adds, I had a client that took a cruise on American Queen and they said it was great. And they have taken
yep.
other river cruises in Europe. So, what a great crossover, friends. That's great,
Hmm.
Diane. Thanks for sharing that. And Gail
And
adds in, go ahead.
I am seeing so much Mississippi interest right now, just with my readers, people who are coming to me for quote requests. And I probably this week alone have gotten about 7 or 8 Mississippi, which is substantial. So people are looking to cruise close to home. So it is something really important to keep in mind.
Yep. Yep. I do I want to read this comment from Gail. I do want to start talking more about the people in your experience, Britton, and having traveled
Sure.
on small ships as well. I'm
Hmm.
going to ask you about how can everyone who's listening right now identify if they may have people on their list, clients, unclients, as I like to say. And by the way, unclients are consumers who have already paid, they've come back from their trip, and they don't have another trip pending, so they're an unclient until such time they deposit on a new trip. How can they recognize this person? Maybe you can paint a picture of that ideal candidate for a small ship cruise. First, a comment from Gail. Yes, with a group, it's nice to have all that done, meaning the gratuities. And she suggests to people to bring a little extra, to take extra care of them, to acknowledge when they go the extra mile. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do. And I know some people, the minute they get on board that ship or to the hotel, if you have a hotel with butlers or personal service, you tip up front. You say, listen, right? We've all, maybe we've done it at restaurants. You walk in the door, say, listen, I'm giving you this now. Thank you for taking great care of us. And there you go, you know? So
Hmm.
let's talk about
Hmm.
small ship cruising. And I know there's small ship, big ocean, river cruise. Give us a general idea of how our travel advisors can recognize somebody who might be ideal for a small ship and never thought of it before?
Well, it's these questions of demographics, right? It's hard. It's like I mentioned earlier, cruising is this extremely customizable experience. And I'm going to go back to my Amaviola trip for 1 second because it was just such a unique group of people. I was not used to seeing that many young people on board a river cruise. I was not used to seeing a river cruise that lively. And not to say that they're not usually lively, but this just really kicked it up a notch. And I was on board with a 16-year-old kid who was on his spring break with his mother. And I said, "Well, how did you get him to do this with you?" And she said, "It was his idea. He loves history and he loves World War II history. And he wanted to come on the Danube so that he could see Germany and Austria." And we ended up going on a hike, and there were only three of us on this hike. And he kind of got the tour guide, the Austrian tour guide, who we were not on any sort of war tour, but to answer his questions because it was just the three of us. And so this kid was the perfect river cruise client, you know, and you really have to look beyond an age group or a mode of travel that's comparable. You have to look at people and say, are you going to be comfortable in this environment that's a little bit smaller, maybe? If you have people who are big ship ocean cruisers and complain about things like paying for extras, or people hassling them about buying meal plans and dining packages and drink packages, those are the people that you want to kind of steer in another direction. Or I think that it really depends on what the experience is. And so for these small ships, even those can be, as we mentioned earlier, broken up into so many segments. I have plenty of people who love river cruising and dislike barges because they don't like how small that ship is. So how much smaller can someone go? How much smaller do they want to go? Do they want to go from 6,000 passengers to 2,000 passengers? Is that enough of a step down? Or are they looking for something where they're only sailing with 200 other people? And it's hard for me to answer that question, quite frankly, because there are so many different groups of people who I think are perfect. So many groups of people come to mind.
Yeah, I think you answered it 100% correct, and I had no doubt, because it's up to the individual preference. Clearly, friends, if you're talking to a prospect and they're looking for something a little different, or you got to listen for key words that indicate they're either looking for something different, something new, tired of what they've been doing, then this should be on your radar to offer. And I must tell you that you can't just say the word to a consumer now. You can't just say the word small ship. They don't understand what that means. Now, we're talking features here with Britton right now, right? But what you need to do, because you have the direct contact with the consumer, it needs to be the benefit. So, because if you just say, "Hey, would you consider a small ship?" Oh, I don't know. No, I don't want to go. What is it going to be? A rowboat? That's too small. No, 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 no. Could you imagine being with, only 120 of your closest friends on I don't know what the Silver Sea is, what the capacity is with some of these yachts. I know I was on Sea Goddess. I don't know if it was one or two, but oh my goodness, that was an experience like no other. I remember every detail of it, every detail. So make sure you define clearly in terms of benefits, the experience, the feeling that they're going to get on a small ship. Don't just leave small ship hanging out there until you define it. What will that feel like? What will that experience be versus what maybe they've already been doing? And also, you're going to find a lot of people like, "Oh no, I'm not interested in cruising. I don't want to be in a ship with 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people." Oh, okay, I've got a solution for you. You can still be at sea. You can only be, 100, 200. How would that sound? Oh, really? Now you got my interest. I didn't know it existed. A lot of people don't even know.
hmm And
And,
that's the point that I was going to make too, hearing you speak, is that a lot of people say, well, cruising isn't for me. And what image of cruising is coming to mind? Are you thinking about cruising isn't for me because there are children flying around on water slides? Okay, well then probably not, probably that type of cruising is not for you. It's not for me either, to be honest. And I specialize in cruising. I cruise all the time. There are certain ships that I do not like to be on. There are certain staterooms that I do not like to be in. It's totally preference, but there are so many different. It's like, oh, I don't like staying in hotels. Do you not like staying in a Motel 8? Do you like staying in the Ritz-Carlton? It's like there is so much room there.
right. Yep, there's so much, and really that's what you signed up for, friends, is to really make sure you deliver the right product, the right experience, so that they come back saying, "Ha, I can't wait to go back again. This was sublime. I've never had this experience before." Let's talk. You also specialize. You talk a lot too about millennials. Well, let's just say young professionals as a
Mhm.
demographic, as a category of traveler. I, I have so many questions to ask about that, but I want to give you some time to define that for us. And what does it mean? What does it look like? What are their likes and dislikes? It's a big question. We could spend a whole hour talking about that, but I want everyone to understand that when we say niche, you could specialize in a particular product, a specific destination, or a specific demographic, a specific age group. Maybe it's young professionals. Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I wrote a story the other day on one of my sites, and it was called The Top Five Cruises for Millennials. And someone commented on my story. I had mentioned Virgin Voyages, I mentioned Celebrity, I mentioned all of these different cruise lines. And someone commented and said, well, what about Seabourn and Silversea? They might not be as woke as some of these other companies, but they're still great experiences. Of course, they're great experiences, but I know very few people my age who are going to be able to afford that. And so it's important to look at price as well when you're looking at young people, apart completely from the experiences. And a lot of these cruise companies, like Virgin, who's coming out with a ship that hasn't come out yet, are taking that into consideration. They are catering toward millennials in activity and also in price, where you have 5 night sailings that are less than $1,000. And so I think that it's important to look at activities on board, but it is also very important to factor price in. There are certain millennials, I would consider myself one of them, who like to be on river cruises with older passengers, who like to be on Silversea and Seabourn and have lectures and be enriched and not really party as much. So again, it depends. But we are seeing this market now of cruise companies who are catering toward millennial travelers. I'll go back to Celebrity for a minute as an example, because one of my favorite ships that I've been on recently was Celebrity Edge. That was in 2018. I was supposed to go on the sister ship Celebrity Apex in 2020. That got canceled because of COVID, of course. But I was so excited to get back on that ship. And I have a friend who's a cruise journalist, Fran Golden. Some of you might be familiar with her name. And she's, 2 times my age plus a little. I love you, Fran. But she was like, I don't get this experience. And it is not, Celebrity is not catering toward their demographic. They are trying to do something else. And I said, and that's the point, I had the best time as a young person because this was something completely different than what I had seen before. There were immersive theater experiences. There are these interesting cocktails. The ship itself is so modern, and a lot of times when you're looking at millennial travelers, you're like, what is the most Instagrammable destination? As stupid as it sounds, what is the most Instagrammable destination and the most Instagrammable ship? And that is something that I think Celebrity definitely took into consideration with those ships. You also have Uniworld has a river cruise product for millennials called U, and those ships have matte black exteriors. They're all black and white with pops of color and neon signs. And that enough for a lot of people my age is a selling point. How does it look? When I'm looking at going to stay in an Airbnb somewhere, I do look through the pictures because I'm like, what kind of post can I make? Because a lot of people my age who want to travel are influencers as well and things like that, and want to build up a social following. And traveling is a great way to brag on social media. So there are so many different factors there as well, but I think that some of these ships, just in appearance alone, have catered toward young people. They have drag
What
queen themed sailings and tattoo themed sailings and things like that. I mean, there's definitely a market there. So,
Yeah, this is so enlightening for me as well. I hope everyone who's listening right now. Instagrammable, that whole new right of the young professional, millennial, that age category, if you
yeah.
will. They pay attention to different things, right? And if you're listening right now, and either that has been your target or you wanted to be your target, that's an important part of this, and it's different from the people in my age category where my kids, when they heard I was in Snapchat, they were like, Dad, no, 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 no. And I love it, but we need to understand where each age group, where our heads are at. And I'm going to take it a step further now. As an agency owner, you need to make sure you talk the talk, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk, meaning your social presence, your website, you need to have that look, right? So as Britton is describing what these cruise lines do visually and experientially, you need to be able to adapt that for your look as well. You need to look the part. You can't say, oh yeah, we specialize in young professionals and millennials, and go to your website and it's from the 1930s. I'm just saying, right? It's got to talk
No,
to you.
exactly. Yeah, there is so much with my age group, and as I said, it sounds horrible to say, but that is based off of appearance. That is based off of, yeah, how does the ship look? How does your website look? How does your business card look? What, things like we do care about it, because when you see something that's really modern, you automatically associate that as something that's, or I automatically associate that as something that's made, that's targeted toward me, that's targeted toward my age group. And so something as simple as that can be a selling point for a cruise company, for you as an advisor, for me as an expert. It's
Yep.
there's so much to that. Stuart, before
Yep.
we move on, if we have another question, I do want to give a shout out to Riviera, because I want to talk about solos for a second.
Yes,
Solo group.
please. Yes.
I think that's something that I often didn't think about is, with cruising, you have this solo supplement. And for those of you who book cruises, who know about cruises, you're familiar with this. Essentially, you're looking at sometimes paying 200% of your cruise fare. You're paying your rate per person times two, because you're taking an entire stateroom. Um, so it's hard to book groups sometimes that have solo travelers. Now, there are certain cruise companies that have solo travel promotions. Tauk, I know, has a select number of solo cabins on itineraries but I want to talk about Riviera, because Riviera has solo only departures, and Riviera also has a select number of solo cabins on every single itinerary that they offer. And so these solo only sailings are a great time to get groups of single people together, and no one pays a solo supplement on those sailings. And even if you have, this is the thing that I didn't think about until recently. If I have three girlfriends that want to travel together, they might not all want to share a stateroom. And so to be able to split them up into these separate cabins on these solo only sailings is a good selling point. So I didn't want to leave our time here without mentioning that, because I think that Riviera really does have an advantage when it comes to solo travelers. So if you have people looking for solo, I would just recommend that you take a look at Riviera,
Brilliant.
because they're a lesser known company for US
Yeah.
advisors.
Brilliant. I so glad that you forwarded that, because uh, it's another opportunity that we may not be aware of. So, some of these smaller niche brands, I don't really like calling them suppliers. brands is a lot sexier. They're out there, and they may not be preferreds if you're with a consortia or with a host. Maybe they are, but you need to keep your eyes open for this, because that'll again help you put you in that blue ocean, if you will, to have that specialty and to pursue with greater success. Having the right brands at your disposal as your preferreds, operating in your niche in the small ship market. There's one final question I think we're going to end with, and we only have, oh my goodness, 4 minutes left. Hey, friends, last minute for questions and comments. Type it in quick now. I want to remind everybody that Britton's podcast is called Avid Traveler with Britton.frost. And it's please subscribe to it. It's really, and I love you keep yours to 30 minutes. I can't help myself. We go the hour. I just, if you gave me 2, I'd fill 2, but I understand. I think 30 is a great number, and your focus, your content is very interesting. Would you leave us with, give us a synopsis of one you did recently, and the question was, does cruising have a concrete future? Right? It's looking ahead from your perspective, young, coming in, and so many of us have been in this business for so many years. Can you give us a preview of what you talked about, a recap, a summary, what your thoughts are?
Sure. Well, the title of this podcast, I have to just admit this to you all, I didn't say anything about it on the episode, was a little bit petty, because I got an email from a subscriber saying, please remove me from your subscription list. Cruising has no concrete future. And so I decided to make this podcast, Does Cruising Have a Concrete Future? Because the answer in my mind is clearly yes. I, for a while, was worried about how quickly cruising would return, but there was never a question in my mind that it would return, because I think we saw a lot of people at the very beginning of the pandemic who said, I'll never go on a cruise ship, after they saw what happened on these princess ships that got stuck off of the coast of wherever. But the reality of the situation is that most of these people who are saying I'll never cruise are people who never cruised to begin with. And so we're not losing people in that way. Most of the people that I know who cruise, and most of my subscribers, said that they would be ready to sail as soon as they're vaccinated. There are things that come into play. Not everyone wants to be vaccinated. Some people are ready to just get back on ships now, but the people who are cruisers are definitely interested in cruising again. And I think that for a long time, river cruising, I saw a lot of older people. I would say that the median age when I started river cruising was probably 65. And now I see couples in their 40s. I see children on board. And maybe I'm still seeing a lot of people in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, but I am also seeing these young people coming in. And I think that the cruise companies are doing a lot. As we said, Celebrity has made this new class of ships. Virgin Voyages is delving into cruising. There are plenty of different options for young people, and cruise companies. Then you have companies like Holland America Line. When I was on New Stotendam, I said, "What are you doing to attract millennial travelers?" And they said, "Nothing. That's not who we want on board." And so you have these different things. But as far as COVID is concerned with cruising's future, I think that just like everything else, at the beginning of this, I had people saying, oh, you're in a horrible industry at this time. And it's like, now you talk to anyone and you say, oh, well, it's a bad industry at this time, because everyone is having hardships. I think cruising got the brunt of it at the beginning, but the cruise lines are ready to come back, and plenty of people sailed this summer. There were river cruise companies who sailed in Germany. Once they locked down again, they had to stop. The river cruise season isn't happening right now anyway. This is the off season. So we will see river cruises resume in the spring. Silver Sea was chartered by the Saudi Arabian government and used to sail around Saudi Arabia this summer. Sea Dream was able to sail. Uncruise planned to sail and then had an unfortunate incident that really, they thought that they had a COVID outbreak on board. Turned out to be nothing really. But there's a lot of protocols in place. The cruise companies are ready, and they are absolutely going to be able to move forward and move out of this. There's not a question in my mind.
Agreed. It's so nice to end on such a positive note. I was saving that up for last because I knew you were going to talk about it with a smile. I knew
Yeah.
that you would be nothing but encouraging and optimistic. And I think well, all of our attendees right now, all these travel advisors, these are your leadership moments. You've heard me say this before. Consumers are looking at you to answer that same exact question I just asked Britton. What's going to be? What's it going to be? And it's your job, your role. In your heart of hearts, you got to believe in it too, is to have that level of enthusiasm and confidence. Of course, understanding why they're anxious. They have every right to be, and you to be that leadership person to have a calming, soothing effect. And all right, let's look at 2022. If you're not ready this year, fine. Let's lock in something for 23, whatever it is. Britton, this has been great. We're getting a lot of very positive comments. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Zakia, for this. Thanks for being here. I really enjoyed having this chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone had a question that we didn't get to, as I said, feel free to contact me. I am always around. Stuart will link the websites. You can find my contact information there. My personal email is just britton.frost@gmail.com.
Britton, thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Stuart.